Okay, everyone, thanks much indeed. Eventually in the presentation, you will get a copy, members, and obviously on email tomorrow, I've been told. And Crime Commission at this time. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 7th of March. Very happy for me to sign this off as a correct record. Apologies for absence.
Councillor Wendy Roundell and Councillor Eden.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm waiting.
Okay, wasn't Wendy Randall. Okay. Declarations of members' interests. None. If not now, the chairman as and when the occasion presents itself. The first substantive item tonight is under environment issues. It's the DEFRA Waste Consistency Consultation. Councillor Gilbert.
So the report before you is the proposed response to DEFRA Waste Consistency Consultation. Now it has a direct relevance on this council and it could have potentially significant financial consequences. I should point out that while it is proposed each council sends in their own response, the Northamptonshire Waste Partnership will look at those individual responses and drawing on those, prepare a response themselves. This hopefully will maximise the overall impact. Now the intention of the DEFRA consultation is good in that it is hoping to secure a much higher level of recycling, and it has various proposals put forward that it's asking authorities to do. They're highlighted in the report, but if I just go through that, one is to collect a core set of materials for recycling, which we do. Collect materials for recycling separately rather than co-mingled, which we do not. As you know, when we implemented the new service, we went from separation to co-mingled. Collect food waste at least weekly, which we do. A lot of authorities up and down the country haven't chosen to take this up, and the others have, but we're at the forefront there. The next one is provide a free garden waste service, which I was horrified to see, at least fortnightly from spring to autumn. Now we offer the garden waste service, but we charge for it. Now this enables us to have a sustainable waste service going forward. It also asks that maybe we should collect residual waste at least fortnightly, which we do not, and that we should standardise information and bin colours. Now, I can understand why that would be put forward, but that again would be a significant expense. So as you can see from those items I've highlighted, there are some significant issues on this council, which I say have been summarised in section 4.2 of the report. But if all of these were to go through, then there would be a significant financial impact on the council. The detailed responses are appendix to the report, so I don't propose to go through those individually, because you should have all read them ahead of this evening's meeting, but to really just concentrate on those key principles that are in the proposal. Now, DEFRA feel that by introducing these proposals, it's likely to increase the amount of residual waste. Now, it's acknowledged that, the government's proposals are well-intentioned, but our experience on the ground with our new system is that possibly their consultation is flawed, in that we have seen a significant increase by the introduction of our new system. We've been positive in our responses where we can, where there's been positive proposals, but highlighted our areas of concern. I would add that our leader was with DEFRA the other week, and as a result we do have DEFRA coming down to visit us at Daventry District Council to look at the results of our 321 service, which is opposite to what they're proposing in parts. So we're hoping therefore to not only lobby by our written response, but as our visit when DEFRA come to see us. So therefore, having explained the high level and you've seen the detail, I'm asking that you approve the responses to the consultation.
Thank you, Steve, Councillor Guildford. I just wanted to confirm that point. I think there's a DEFRA. I actually contacted it's the policy advisors of government in DEFRA are. I asked them to come down to look at the system because I felt some of the proposals in their plans weren't necessarily well informed. And I think sometimes it's no criticism of the department or anyone else. But sometimes when you're in the centre there, you don't always see what's really going on the ground. And I thought one of the two of the things that you touched upon there, Councillor Guildford, weren't going to actually help. And so when they come down next month, hopefully they can look at it and maybe take a different view away of them. And obviously the Minister will be involved, informed of that as well, at that point as well. Our MD will also be invited to that meeting. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Councillor Guildford. I think it's very good that actually they're obviously consulting on this issue. And of course the government at the minute, as we know, is a bit snarled up because of Brexit. But actually I think there's some very good initiatives coming out of the government in respect of the Environment Bill, the 25-year plan, etc. This is something I've spoken about on many occasions actually in the past about standardisation across the United Kingdom, or at least England and Wales and everybody, to be able to create a standard pattern of understanding about what is needed to be collected and what can be collected. I think while some of their consultation questions may be flawed based upon our experience, I think it's very good they're engaging. And actually I think we have an opportunity here to demonstrate that in Daventry district we could be an exemplary local authority to actually be even a case study for this type of approach. And the fundamental thing is, I think the structural approach is right in terms of standardisation and thinking about it. But I think, as we've really observed, it's about changing behaviour. I remember, of course, when we've been knocking on doors, before the elections last year, when came out, and people were complaining about that. The fact of the matter is, if we get as little waste, the residual waste, as possible in the black bins, then that's obviously a good thing in terms of landfill. So I welcome this and the work that's been done, but I reckon we should really push to be able to be held up as an exemplar. I work with the government very closely to have a good scheme that could be adopted across the country as the consultation continues.
I think it's important we do help inform governments when they take these big decisions that they are properly informed. I'll come back to the end, Councillor Guildford. Any more comments or observations, Councillor Organ?
Yeah, I agree about the common minimum standards, that there is a disconnect throughout the country with regard to this. But my question is, one, are they thinking about making us or compelling us to a common minimum standard, so whereby it will become statute, or are they going to allow some flexibility for, right, so we're talking about a statutory requirements, minimum standard, and we can't deviate from that?
I'm not sure that's clear, but I think the most important thing is to get as much information back as possible through evidence to help them make up the way forward, to make sure it's properly informed. And that's one of the reasons we're inviting them down to look at our system. We felt some of their proposals weren't necessarily best, based upon our experience.
But this is the problem. There are going to be some excellent places or excellent policies, procedures and working practices that may be peculiar to a particular location that work well. So I would also ask us to ensure that there is some sort of flexibility to deal with the bespoke, to deal with the one-off, so we don't end up with just a blanket minimum standards, that we're allowed flexibility where it works locally. So hopefully the legislation will reflect that.
Thank you, Richard. Simon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We had a visit last week, I think it was, from Ministry of Housing and Community local government officials. General meeting, as it were, to see what was going on on our patch. And one of the points they'd already picked up was how our recycling rates had improved. If you recall, once upon a time we were a beacon council. So we then, at that time, we sold our wares, as it were, to the other councils. They surpassed us. But now we're picking up again based on this model. And we use that opportunity to reinforce this point about the model as the basis for consultation isn't appropriate for all places. So don't do a one-size-fits-all. And in particular, have in mind the rural areas. And one of the things with, I'm afraid to say, with some of our colleagues in central government, they don't always see the rural areas as much as they see the urban areas. So we made that point quite strongly, and they received it very well, and they were going to feed that back through to DEFRA as well. So we're trying all channels, officers and members.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I'm really pleased to see the responses to this. I think they're robust, they're evidence-based, they stand up well for Daventry districts. Ultimately, the proposals and the consultation put forward by DEFRA smacks of a bit of an attack on localism. To me, central government wants to dictate standards on waste collection, recycling, etc. Then why don't they just manage it and fund it themselves? Local government exists for a reason. We're doing well on recycling here. We know our area. We know its needs. We should be allowed to put forward the best model for it. Minimum standards, possibly, but ultimately it's a local issue that should be left to the purview of local councils. The one that really gets my goat is the proposed provision of a free garden waste service. The Conservative government especially should know that nothing's free. It has to be paid for by somebody, and if they're not going to provide the funding themselves, then it's deeply disconcerting that they're demanding that we provide a so-called free service when in fact, the limited charge that we've implemented quite sensibly allows us to provide the sustainable waste service that Councillor Gilbert has mentioned, and we should have the freedom to continue to do so.
I think that's very, very wise comments, Councillor Brown. I just want to also add that you see councils elsewhere who do more like free weekly black bin collections. You see their diversion rates away from landfill have increased massively, and that's exactly what we're seeing here in Daventry. And I think it's a case there that if you're going to encourage people to actually force them to use other means of disposing of their waste diverted from landfill, then it does seem to work. And I think what we're seeing in Daventry, actually, the public are actually buying into this, which is very, very promising. Was it Councillor Aubrey again?
No, sir.
Councillor Aubrey, my apologies.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Ramsey's point. I think the fact in terms of costs and so on, I think that could be a local issue. I think for me, call me basic on this one, but I think there's two fundamental, three issues. I think the first one, we have to tidy the country up. I think we have to do more recycling because resources are precious. So I think there's an environmental imperative that we do. I'm very passionate about that. The second thing is, I think there does need to be an element of standardisation, but it's how you standardise. I'm really picking up on your issue, Councillor. Sometimes, standards are often built on the bare minimum, and obviously they're built up over time once you've got a bare minimum. But probably some local authorities do a lot less, and are probably less innovative and enterprising than we are. And in that case, of course, it may be an outlier, but I think you have to draw the baseline. And even very basic things like a colour coding system or having infrastructure in there that could be recycled, infrastructure enables recycling of different things is important. I guess I do work in this space anyway, so the concept of a circular economy is pretty commonplace to me in daily language. And when you see either other countries or even how supply chains are challenged with this, when often it's ability to recycle things that are a challenge. So I think really that leads kind of to the third thing, which is you should have a basic framework but then have bespoke elements on it which can be built. And I think I do congratulate the government on doing this. I think it does need doing. And like was said, I think we do have a good evidence response, but we do need the framework to be flexible as well, but with a minimum standard.
Absolutely right, Councillor Morgan. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Morgan.
I'm just wondering, as presumably DEFRA are also working with your manufacturers, because surely this is about from the packaging and getting informed at both ends of the scale. So I'm just wondering whether in the discussions we've had with them, are they talking about the conversation upstream with regard to linking up the recycling with the actual production of packaging?
Over the years, this has been raising over the years on the Waste Partnership, Waste Partnership. Because most of the waste actually comes from outside household waste. Yeah. You think about the manufacturing waste, but obviously the government tends to focus on household waste. And we're really saying it's a big issue. And I think over recent years there has been a change in some of these big companies. Do you want to come to that, Maria? Do you more?
Yes, can do, Chairman. Certainly the polluter pays principle is evident everywhere you look, right from the kind of recycling we're doing in aid of the Chairman's charity, collecting coffee pods, and just started doing the crisp packets and encouraging other communities to do the same. A lot of the big brand organisations are going after having sustainable work plans. We know that for our environmental promotion work. So some of the big coffee chains take all of their food waste out with on the same lorries that bring the new food in, and they've got food. They support food bank type operations and provide charitable donations. So we are seeing that, but fundamentally, yes, polluter pays is about making sure companies are as sustainable and responsible as possible.
Thank you for that. So, Councillor Morgan again?
Chair, maybe a final word from me. I've got to be careful here. I'll be declaring interest at the round going actually, but you've got organisations like RAP as well that are based down in Daventry. They're doing a stack of work on this. The only way to approach is the whole value chain or a circular value chain opportunity. Everything from how manufacturers use the black trays, are there alternatives in there? I think a lot of, I speak to companies on a daily basis about this kind of issue, and it's a real challenge across industry to reduce the amount of packaging and so on. And really, I think what Daventry are doing is their multi-pronged attack really by taking it all in. And that's why we've seen, again, back to RAP, commissioning a stack of work on food waste and those kind of things, all across the value chain of various different items, right from the farm all the way down to supermarkets and households and so on. So I think it is really being tackled. And actually, I think, and this is not a political point, I think Michael Gove, particularly if you could really have full focus on this, I think you'd be doing a cracking job in this area. Actually, I think it's got a vision.
Thanks, Councillor Morgan. Of course, one-use plastics is an issue, isn't it? Sorry, use once. Single-use plastic.
Yes, I think the real challenge is a lot of this stuff is very hard to recycle, and a lot of effort is going into working on that.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Gove.
Okay, I don't think there's any specific questions to answer there after the debate, but the only additional comment I would add is regarding standardisation. You know, as a Northamptonshire Waste Partnership, we have looked over the years at the possibility of having the same service across the county, and I'm sure with the future, the two unitaries, that there will be efficiencies in having at least the same system over time. So I think standardisation could come, over time by default as up and down the country, more and more councils join together.
Thanks for that. We have one resolved item tonight. We have to agree the proposed response. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Guildford. Move on to economic regeneration and employment issues. Council disposal of 42 houses, Middlemore. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that in July last year we rescinded the decision to dispose of the 32 houses at Middlemore in control of Daventry, following a recommendation from the Scrutiny and Improvement Committee. Tonight's report follows on from that with satisfying one or two other recommendations to the Scrutiny and the Improvement Committee in order to wrap up the matter entirely. On page 42 of the agenda tonight, you'll see that the Scrutiny and Improvement Committee produced a majority report and a minority report and proposals in response to that. If you look at the table there, item 1 is already dealt with because we've decided not to sell the 32 houses. Item 2, although both the majority and minority report recommended some action there, it was felt that this would not be appropriate for us to outline what the potential impact of the move to unitary authorities would be on the various tenancies, the impact on their tenancies. And there's good reason for that. We can't gainsay what the new unitary authority becomes, what it might decide to do or not do. I suspect, and I think others may concur with this, that the unitary will have far more important matters than to discuss the 32 houses at Middlemore. The other reason, of course, is that if we were to attempt to outline any potential impact, we would probably be misleading those tenants and may encourage them to take an action which may be either detrimental to themselves, detrimental to the occupancy of the houses, or detrimental to both. So that was not considered appropriate, no action is taken. Number 3, which follows on from the recommendations again of both minority and majority reports, the Council has decided that it will take the following action. The Council and TDEC will take all necessary steps to maximise occupancy of the vacant properties. So that forms one of the recommendations to strategy tonight. Item 4 is concurred with that. As a gesture of goodwill, the Council issues a without prejudice apology in writing to all affected tenants who can legitimately be contacted for any misunderstanding that has taken place. The wording of the letter to be referred to the Chairman of S&I and the Leader of the Council for consideration prior to its issue. Members will recall that a number of the tenants up there claimed that they were misled, particularly by the term lifetime tenancies or lifetime house or something or other. And it was claimed that one or two may have been encouraged or misled into moving from the houses of their own volition rather than wait to see what happened. So as a consequence of that, it's decided to issue that apology in writing. The rest of the majority and minority reports, the majority report doesn't recommend any action on, the minority report does, but it is considered that no action should be taken on any of those points raised in that part of the minority report. So there are 2 recommendations before you this evening.
MSD, Councillor James. Any comments? Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on this. Councillor James has made reference to a majority report and a minority report. Indeed, there were 2 reports. There was a task panel of 2. One member wrote one report and the other wrote the other. However, Councillor Brown...
So I checked difference of opinion, was it, Councillor Ritchie?
Councillor Brown had a casting vote as the chair. And that makes his report the minority report. Not that my own report is more of a supplementary report in that I fully support quite a lot of the points that Councillor Brown has made. But I am concerned. I know that we have discussed this at various other committees. The argument has been put that there's no dispute about what was written into the tenancy agreements, and that because the DDC has observed the written terms of the tenancies, it has therefore acted lawfully. There have been suggestions that to actually go further would be at least unwise, if not unlawful. The difficulty I think that comes up is that in law, what is actually said at the time of the selling of any bit of merchandise or any agreement also has got legal standing. Even if it didn't, the way in which these properties were marketed, I think needs to be examined, because it is on that basis that we have got to decide whether the tenants, and that I include those who were tenants but have moved on as a result of the things that have happened. It's on that basis that we need to decide whether they have been treated reasonably or not. Now, when Councillor Brown and I met with the tenants, they were fairly consistent, were almost fully consistent, in their accounts of what they had been told when they entered into the tenancy agreements. We get no reason not to believe them. We did, however, feel that it was important that we get information from former staff who were involved at the time. And it's unfortunate that we weren't able to actually meet with them, but through the officers, we were given a number of emails that they had sent. Now, extracts from these you will find on page apologies, on page, page 60, starting in 61, mainly on page 62.
Right.
What the evidence that came back from these emails is perfectly consistent with what we were told by the tenants. I just note a few of the points, I'm not going to read them all. One, they were definitely selling the proposition as long-term lettings. Again, same person, it was implying that as long as the tenants abide the terms of their tenancies, they could carry on renting. I can't remember the exact form of words that's quoted. So it goes on. Another officer. They shared the delight at being able to rent a place for a longer duration, beyond their 6 months contract, as they were not expecting the council to dispose of these properties anytime soon, unlike a private landlord, where it is less certain when the landlord requires possession. And they say that the former member of staff says, I believe I echoed the same sentiment by reiterating the position of Dedeco. A third person, I thought they were long-term, and was not, nobody would have told them they could stay there forever. But if she had said it, I would not have agreed or disagreed. Now, that last comment, if this matter were to become the subject of a legal challenge, that surely is quite explosive. What it is effectively saying is that the person who was representing the district council, if they felt that there was a misconception about the nature of the tenancy, they would have been quite happy not to correct the understanding that the tenants had. And there is an acceptance there that it was the policy of Dedeco. These houses were built to give revenue income, not for capital appreciation, but they were there, they were going to be there for a long time. There is a key facts document that I do refer to somewhere that makes it clear that the understanding that these were going to be long-term tenancies. It is, so I see that it was provided, our desire is for you to remain our tenants for the long term. Simon Bowers has confirmed, or just said, he confirmed to the task force that yes, this was a project that was intended to have long-term occupation. Now, I know that part of the misunderstanding arises from the term lifetime homes. Many of the tenants construed that as meaning that they were homes that they might be able to occupy for a lifetime. And we know now that that was not the case. Certainly the way in which the staff talk about the tenancy suggested it was going to be long term, but let's just focus on this lifetime homes. These properties were built. If you look in Councillor Brown's report, page 50, paragraph 511, there is a quote there from the Daventry Express. If I remember rightly, it was a quote from our Chief Executive, whether he said it or not, it was written for him. But it says that they have the flexibility for tenants as they become less able. We were told that lifetime homes would be built in a way that there would be space if people wanted, for example, to install a chairlift. Now, unless tenants have some terrible genetic complications, they are not going to age over the period of a 6-month tenancy. And who in the right mind would pay for the thousands you need to install a chairlift if he thought that they could be turfed out at 2 months' notice? Most installers take a lot longer than 2 months to actually put the stairlift there. The implication is that these were built for people who were going to stay in them for a long time. I think you cannot escape from that. Now, it doesn't mean that those who actually moved as a result of getting the letter that was sent a year ago in January actually had to move. But I ask you, how would you react if you were in a position where your partner was facing in a few months' time a very major operation that was going to take several months of recuperation, would you have hung around and taken the risk that during that period you might need to go out and find a new home for yourself and your partner at this stage in their state of health? How would you react if you were in the position in which your partner had been diagnosed with cancer and there was therefore a huge amount of uncertainty about what lay ahead, about what treatment would be necessary? Well, if you had waited when you were at that critical stage in life to wait and see if you were going to need to be given 2 months' notice when everything else in your life was coming apart? Well, of course you wouldn't. If you had a family with several children, you know that there are not that many properties that are of the size you need and at the cost that you can afford. Will you wait until a time when you only had a couple of months in the hope that at that stage there might be something suitable in the market? Or would you move when you saw that there was an opportunity and that a bird in the hand was worth something else that might never come along? Now, these are not hypothetical cases. These are the experiences of the people who were on that particular estate and who felt they had no choice but to move. They say that moving house is one of the most stressful experiences that most people encounter. If it is moving, not because you want to move, not somewhere that is better, but to somewhere that is less suitable for you, that stress has got to be even greater. Now, I just feel that in these circumstances, we cannot simply say, look, we acted lawfully and it has nothing to do with us. An argument has been put that, look, it would be unfair to other residents, to other council taxpayers, if we spent their money on giving compensation to a particular group who had suffered this misfortune. There would be anger. Well, I haven't done any full survey, but I have asked a considerable number of people, and the response I get is that that is absolutely nonsense. There will be much more anger that the district council does not do something to act compassionately. People do not want to feel that they have got a district council that is going to play it as strictly by the book as it can, to be as mean as it can be. They want to know that they have a district council that is there, that if somebody gets into a difficulty that has been created by district council policies, then the district council is going to show a little bit of compassion and do what it can to assist. There have been meetings in which quite a number of tenants have come along to listen to our debates. And at these meetings, they have always been told that yes, that we listen sympathetically, we hear what they say, that yes, they have our best interests in heart. That's what they were told when we met them as a task panel. That we were there to listen and to see how we could help them with their problems. If we simply say now, we're going to take no action, it's nothing further to do with us. At the best, we will be seen as having been disingenuous. More likely, we will be seen as having been totally cynical. It will damage our reputation, that's your reputation as a council that is there to act in residents' interests.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie, for that. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I do admire Councillor Ritchie's passion on this issue, and undoubtedly he's put in a huge amount of work alongside myself to reach final conclusions that we both have, albeit distinct conclusions at the very end. What I would point out at the outset is that I don't think at any stage it's been contested that the intention from Daventry District Council's point of view was to embark on a commercial venture by building these homes and establishing T-Decor. That's a very important factor when we consider the later behaviour of the district council and its decision to consider a sale of the house is a question. Now, Councillor Ritchie has mentioned the testimony from former staff members. We both have slightly differing interpretations of the written correspondence that we've analysed from those staff members. I believe that in the round that written testimony supports the district council's point of view more so than it does the tenants. We then come to a question of two key phrases. So we have long-term and then the lifetime homes. Now, I'll take the lifetime homes aspect first because that's been a source of some considerable confusion. People have come to the belief that lifetime homes meant homes for life, i.e. homes where they had a permanent tenancy situation. However, we have uncovered various sorts of evidence that very clearly pointed to the fact that Homes for Life was a design standard, so that was clearly out in the public domain, that was clearly the council's intention. We then come to the phrase long term, which has been repeated time and time again. By any normal market definition of the phrase long-term, the Daventry District Council has fulfilled its aim to provide long-term housing. The short-term tenancy agreement is for 6 months. These houses have now been occupied for upwards of 6 or 7 years. So people are now on periodic statutory tenancies, I believe it's a technical term, which is a rolling monthly basis. But there has been long-term occupation of those properties. That is beyond doubt. And whilst there are some very evocative but very moving personal stories of the tenants in those houses, as there would be in probably any street up and down the country, people go through tough times, they encounter hugely difficult situations, that cannot be accounted for by this council, by our decision to establish a commercial venture to rent out houses. And it is simply an unfortunate reality that being a tenant of a property is in itself an unstable situation. And whether you are renting or leasing from T-Deckel, or renting or leasing from a private landlord, you are not in as stable a situation as you would be if you owned your home or if you were in social housing. And we must be very clear on this point that T-Deckel was never ever social housing. It was a commercial venture by the council. Finally, not finally, but penultimately, Councillor Ritchie mentions my assertion that we shouldn't be spending or rushing to spend taxpayers' money on compensation. I made that point merely to highlight the fact that if we are to award compensation, there needs to be a very high bar to clear. The case for compensation needs to be absolutely sound before we consider spending taxpayers' money on such an expense. It's not to say that we should never do that if the case was clearly defined and clearly justifiable. However, I don't think that threshold has been reached in order for us to justify an award of compensation when the council has been fairly consistent in the way that it has complied with the terms of the tenancy agreement. It's set out to undertake the commercial venture that I mentioned previously, and despite the sources of confusion and contention, the council has not, in my view, acted unlawfully at any point. It has probably not been as professional as we may have hoped in some regards. However, I believe that it has always acted in good faith, both in its treatment of the tenants and its regard for the wider interests of the taxpayer. Finally, Councillor Ritchie made several references to our undertakings as a task panel, the way that we interacted with residents, the fact that we were there to listen. And yes, we were there to listen, and we have listened, and we've reacted by finding solid evidence to justify the cessation of the move to sell the homes. And ultimately, as a scrutiny committee, we're there to gather evidence, we're there to come to evidence-based conclusions in order to arrive at more sound policy decisions, and we have done that. And in my view, having carefully considered all the evidence, the final recommendations, even after the amendments by officers, are sound. That doesn't mean for a moment that I believe that either Councillor Ritchie or myself has acted in any way disingenuously, as he phrased it. I don't believe that we're taking the attitude that it is, quite nothing to do with us. It is simply that we have weighed up all the evidence, we have analysed the intentions and conduct of the council, and we found that on the balance of probabilities, the council has acted properly for the most part, and so we simply haven't reached the threshold that needs to be reached in order to justify an award of compensation. By recommending an apology, I believe that not only are we acting with humility, we're acting with good manners, and we're acknowledging that things could have been done better, but we have not breached the law, we have not acted with recklessness in our treatment of the tenants, and so I'm satisfied with the final conclusion, albeit that I continue to have the greatest sympathies for anyone that has been adversely affected by their experiences with this matter, but I am supportive of the recommendations that are in the final report.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. Councillor Brown. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank both Councillor Brown and Ritchie for taking this on. When this first came through, it was a real tough one for me. I didn't feel comfortable at all with what was being suggested with the sale of these places, and it was a big topic in my home with regard to, as a local politician, what can I do to actually do what I feel is right to ensure that people don't lose their homes in these circumstances, even though I totally accept that the council were doing nothing unlawful. My issue with what I've just heard in this debate is this compensation culture. Just because we make mistakes, or we not make mistakes, but we make a move which is not agreed with, why should that automatically equate to some sort of financial cost? That just is ludicrous. You can't live life like that. Where there is genuine loss of finances, and I think the criteria, when our criteria is met, absolutely people should be compensated. But this hasn't happened. The local council had an income generating scheme that they then wanted to sell on, and we as elected members said, do you know what, that doesn't feel right, that isn't right, and eventually through the scrutiny committee we had that rescinded. Absolutely the right thing to do. Why does that automatically open people up to financial compensation? I don't see the link. I don't see the link. The right thing was done with regard to allowing these people to stay in their homes, and God bless them, and may they stay in. I do not agree with this compensation issue. I think it's totally unacceptable that we should be paying unless there is a genuine loss of money where we can find that we are culpable in some sort of way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. And Councillor Ritchie.
Can I point the clarification? Is that the
Councillor Ritchie.
Chair? Is it a point of clarification that I can offer? My point is that this is not about a compensation culture. These people have had the costs of moving home. They have had the costs of moving to places that they have then needed to furnish. And you will know from any move that you've had, your curtains and your carpets and other things simply don't fit. They have had the costs, they have the costs that they have incurred in making improvements to the homes that they were in Middlemores, tiling floors, putting in garden sheds, paving the gardens, things like that. They have spent that money and they have lost the value of it. They have therefore had real material losses, quite apart from having their lives totally messed up.
Presumably you're reflecting there the rented sector as a whole, are you? The private rented sector as a whole.
No, I'm talking about what has happened to the people who have moved from Middlemore. It happened, it has cost them money to move.
Across the country, this is not unusual, is that right?
Yeah, but they would not have had that cost if they had not received the letter a year ago in January saying that it was likely that other homes would be sold.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
I was going to start off from a similar point to what Ken's just made, so I'll skip that one. But I believe I spoke while this issue was going on about my personal dissatisfaction to some of the language that was being used around just seeing it as financial savings or financial costs rather than actually considering the impact that it was having on the residents. And again, that's something that sort of comes up again tonight. And I understand that as a district council we do have financial responsibilities, and people might not want to dish money out here, there, wherever. But I think it's been raised and it's been made quite clear that whether or not we acted illegally, and I see the argument that there was nothing that we did that was illegal, and I can accept that, but I think it's quite clear that there was a genuine misunderstanding and faults in the process of what was communicated to the local residents, and I think we can hold our hands up and accept that. Now, due to the costs that would be incurred, health issues, possibly from stress, I mean, we could see from the people who came out to this council chamber and the people that we spoke to, just how greatly this was impacting on their lives. And you might say, oh, well, at the end of the day, we didn't sell them, so they didn't have to sell their house. But when this first came forward, it seemed like a very definitive decision. It really did. And that, a resident who is facing that, you're going to get scared and you're going to make that reaction to try and protect yourself. So, for me then, if I was in that position, I have moved house, I've been through that stress, to receive a letter from the council just saying, sorry about that, I'd want to stick my two fingers up and say, well, shut it. It's just a letter saying thank you, that doesn't mean anything. Now, the money that's being proposed by Councillor Ritchie, it'd be a lot of money to those people, but really in the grand scheme of things for the council, is it a massive amount of money? I don't really think it is. And I think in times of the wider image of the district council, of how we reviewed when this was going on, I think this would be greatly welcomed by the wider community. So.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey, for that. Councillor Guildford?
Okay, I'd like to thank Scrutiny for doing such a thorough role on this issue. I do support the recommendations. I'll deal with recommendation 2 first. I won't go into it too much because I think Councillor Auger has portrayed my views in that area. On recommendation 1, I just wanted to understand the purpose of that recommendation, because we've heard this evening how, just a commercial venture, how TG Electrical produced an annual report to BBC as its shareholder, and it's recommending something that's done anyway. I mean, it's a commercial venture. TG Electrical do take all the necessary occupancy. So I just need to understand why it's stating the opposite, being a commercial venture.
I don't think it's stating the opposite. It's
That's stating the obvious.
Oh, the obvious, yeah.
Because it does everything it can.
Really, that's remained from my original report that recommended that we do not sell the houses. And at the time that I wrote that report, there was a fairly substantial an occupancy rate at the role. So, at that point in time, it seemed like a more cogent recommendation than it might do now, when I believe that far more of the houses are now occupied. So, absolutely right, and it is an obvious step to take, and I think actually some report states that we are doing it anyway. So
yes.
There's almost a perfect.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just need to mention that, of course, myself and Councillor Guildford are directors of TNECO, actually. I was going to agree with Councillor Guildford, actually. The first point is obvious because that's a mandate anyway. Yeah. So there's no harm being in there, but it has no value. I also want to thank Scrutiny. Obviously, being a previous chair, it can be quite a challenge there reconciling views, but it's quite unusual to have, in fact I've never seen it before, have a minority and a majority board, but I think in a way it's healthy because you've obviously had a debate and it's been a complex issue, and it's been very good to hear both sides. And of course, I was also at the SNI committee today when you presented and discussed it. There was a very genuine discussion. I like to think we did the residents a good service by having that and honouring the challenges they had. There is a very small issue actually I have, and that is in the wording. For clarity, do we mean basically the second line down? Is it we're actually on the recommendation? Yeah, we're actually writing to former tenants, aren't we? That can legitimately be contacted, not affected tenants. I wonder if it's worth simply having that clarity.
No, current and former tenants. There are still original tenants in situ at the T-Deck properties who are going to be based.
That was what confused me actually, because I would have thought it had been obviously very possible to legitimately contact them if they're living there already. So under what circumstances could you not and perhaps legitimately there because he covers both, perhaps. And that kind of really goes back to the point about, you know, the money amount. I think it's not in the recommendations anyway, but it's clarity on how many people that would be affected by. I personally don't support paying them the money, but I do recognise why Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Ramsey will support that. I think it's completely justifiable for them to recommend it, but I don't personally agree.
On that point, Councillor Morgan, Maria,
T-Deckle would not necessarily come into information about former tenants, and the council certainly could not provide that information into the general data protection regulation, which was what that's alluding to.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I started a new course of strong painkillers this week. So I actually forgot while I was making my point that was intended to be a motion a proposal to include the final 3 points of the minority report onto the recommendation.
Okay, so proposal from yourself. Do you have a seconder?
Possibly not.
No. So that's fallen. Sorry about that. Okay. Can I just say, I have to say, it's a very interesting debate tonight. It's fascinating to see two of the key people in the scrutiny function with separate views. And I think that's quite healthy, actually, in a way. And I thought both gentlemen put their cases across really well. So I say well done to both of you. Clearly, committee, we have two recommendations before us tonight, 1 and 2. Are you happy to support it? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Okay, that's carried. Thanks very much indeed. We now move on to housing and environmental health issues. Hackney Carriage Tariff Review, Councillor Order.
Thank you. We're asking that this committee or group resolve that a public consultation is undertaken on alterations to the Hackney Carriage Tariff. Just a little bit of background. Daventry District Council, as a licensing authority, is responsible for setting the Hackney Carriage Tariff within the district. The fare tariff is only applicable to licensed Hackney carriages and sets the maximum fare that may be charged. This tariff has not increased since 2007, and I can imagine there have been increase in running costs. In fact, I'm not saying this is accurate, but I did some research on 2007 for 40 litres of petrol was about £37, and in 2019 it's gone up to £48. So there obviously has been an increase. As a result of that, a ballot took place with the licensed taxi drivers, and the majority of them came up with, if you turn to page 66, with option 1, which is an increase on all rates of 40 pence. Now, to give a little bit of context to this and a little bit of balance, there is a balance here between the public who use the taxis and obviously the drivers who need to earn a living from them. And so I think here, based on what we are doing, if you look at comparative fares nationally, for a 2-mile fare, we are still currently under the national average. So we are increasing the ability of our drivers to earn more money, but it's not going over the top as we're out of sync with national fares, and more particularly, we're keeping within that margin for the drivers to benefit, and also the customers not to get ripped off. One final point, which I think is quite interesting, is that if we resolve this tonight with a public consultation process, the proposal will be advertised in local press and will await responses for a period of 14 days. That's good. So it goes out to the public, they hear about the increases, and they have a chance to respond. If there is a response, and it's a negative response, this is what I think is good, is there's an opportunity then for the objections to be included in a report to the licensing committee for consideration ahead of any changes to the tariff. So if there is some objection and some feel from the public that actually we're out of kilter here, we've gone too far, it will go to a body to review that decision, that committee. If there are no objections, then the new rates will take effect from the closure of the consultation period. So that completes the report. Hopefully I've explained it reasonably well.
You explained it very well, Councillor.
Thank you. So over to my colleagues.
Councillor Gilford?
Yes, I do support the recommendations in the report.
The recommendation? What resolve?
And you quite understand why the needs to be increased because you're for so long. And I was glad there was also a benchmarking table to see where we fall within that benchmarking table. I just need to understand, so DDC is currently 322nd in the table?
Yes.
Or is that after when the increase is applied, where would we fall then?
We're currently 322 out of 363, and we'll still be less than average, so less than the midpoint of 363 with the increases.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification. Sorry, I've got a few hands here. Okay. Start Councillor Hill, which I've spoken tonight, yeah?
I support this. I think we must consult on this. Let's face it, if you're a member of the public, you don't like any increases anyway, but we have to look at it from a practical sense. And I know that when we look at the earnings of taxi drivers and that, they're certainly not overpaid. And I speak as one who, a few years back, I did work weekends as a taxi driver when I was changing jobs. And you have to work very, very hard to make a decent living. So we've got to balance the two out, and that's why I support it.
Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Hill. Councillor Ramsey?
Yeah, I just wanted a point of clarification. I was a little bit confused looking at the proposal in terms of it's a 40p increase for up to 1 mile, but it's still overall only 40p more for a 15-mile journey. I was just wondering why it doesn't go up in correlation with the amount.
That was what the driver proposed, and that's what we put to the drivers, and they've gone with that, so.
Good question, thank you for that. Councillor Ritchie?
You see, these haven't been changed for quite a long number of years. And if you look at the figures for a 15%, even at the option 1, 40 pence and 31 pounds, that's barely over a 1% increase. I don't want residents to need to pay more than they need to in using taxis. But on the other hand, I don't want taxi drivers to be impoverished. Are you quite sure? I mean, this seems such a trivial little increase that it's hardly worth the cost. I mean, what is the cost of having a consultation and whether you can have an extra 40 pence and a 30 quid bill? Do taxi drivers, did they not come back and say that they want actually something a little bit more realistic than this?
We'll ask Maria to confirm.
When we consulted drivers, we said this has been suggested, and drivers had the opportunity to ask for more. They're very strongly supportive of the proposal. It's also worth remembering that a Hackney carriage driver can charge that as a maximum. So actually, perhaps that was a healthy maximum when it was set 10 years ago, and it's only now more recently that some are struggling. A Hackney carriage driver can operate as a private hire driver, so if you go to a Hackney carriage driver and say, how much would you charge me to take me to X airport, you can agree a price and not be on the meter, as long as that, and so they can operate as a private hire driver as well. So they have some flexibility about charging lower prices, but that's the absolute maximum they can charge, and I suspect that's why they've all fallen behind supporting this proposal.
It's interesting to see that only 25% of the licensed drivers actually respond. Councillor Brown?
Nothing to disagree with what everyone else has said. There's nothing objectionable in it. I just think it's a shame that we're compelled to go to consultation, because it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. And just further to what Councillor August said about petrol prices, the tonnage of petrol prices increased, insurance premium tax has gone from 5% in 2007 to 12% today. Vehicle costs have increased massively. Any overhead that taxi drivers face has increased quite substantially since 2007, and I think they're overdue a pay rise.
Just to be clear, so everyone's clear, we have to consult before we increase the tax.
Yes, yeah.
It's prescribed. So just so everyone's clear.
Your point's noted. Councillor Howard.
Yeah, I think we just need to, some councillors talk for the sake of talking. We need to understand what the reports are in front of us. We're only talking about this going out of consultation, not about how much. The taxi drivers already come back to us. So
No, just to clarify, this is, the consultation is going out to the public. After 14 days, if there are no objections, it becomes the new tariff.
yes.
If there are objections, it goes to the licensing committee.
Oh, just sort of
Consider-
Then discuss
The
that.
licensing committee to
I get
consider
that.
that before. So there's not, so that will be, the only thing we're consulting on is option one.
Yeah.
So there's not, what do you think should be different? We're consulting on that
And that's
proposal. I think.
that's what I get. Sorry, I think come across.
I've already consulted the drivers already.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Howard. Thank you. Councillor James.
It's just a clarification for my own personal use, if someone could explain this to me. Let's say I want to go from here to Long Buckby.
That's 50 quid for you.
Yeah.
I'll give you yours. I can send you back tonight if you want.
Test now.
Is £11.20 at 5 miles? Does that mean all I pay the taxi driver is £11.20? Or do I have to pay him £11.20 plus another £11.20 for him to return to his base in the street?
The law in the UK charges from A to B and not to get back again.
Oh, right.
So you can only get a hackney carriage in an area where it's licensed as a hackney carriage. So say they're going out of the district, they could then come back with another fare as a licensed hire driver, but they couldn't pick up a fare off the street. So it's ever so complicated, but no, you pay one way.
One way.
And that is a maximum. Unless you go to them and say how much to go to Long Buckby and agree a price that's different.
Thanks for that question, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we happy to agree the result? Thank you. Go on to the strategic planning issues now. Stanton Neighbourhood Development Plan, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure members are fully aware of the process for the development of a neighbourhood development plan. It's what part of what came out of localism 2011. The Staverton Group, which was formed by the Parish Council as the qualifying body, applied for the designation of a neighbourhood area in 2015. Since then, they've been working sporadically and rather hard to consult on various options in their proposal for a neighbourhood development plan. This they've done. It's been for various levels of consultation and cooperation with public and other stakeholders, and was submitted for examination in 2018, and examination came back with a report which arrived in the middle of February. That report recommended a number of modifications to the plan in order that it should satisfy the examiner's criteria for acceptability. It's important, Chairman, that people understand that the neighbourhood development plan, when examined, is not tested for its soundness, but tested to ensure it meets the basic conditions. And the basic conditions which are listed on page 71, just to remind you, that it has regard to national policies and advice, that the making of the neighbourhood development plan contributes to the achievement of a sustainable development, that making the plan is in general conformity with strategic policies for the development plan for the whole area, which in our case is the Joint Core Strategy adopted in 2014, the making of the neighbourhood plan doesn't breach or is otherwise compatible with currently European Union obligations. Whether that will remain a basic condition in the future has yet to be determined. That the making of the neighbourhood development plan doesn't have a significant effect on a European site, which we don't have here, and the revised NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, was published in July 2018. However, the footnotes make it clear that neighbourhood development plans submitted before this January should have regard to the 2012 NPPF, and this plan was submitted before that date and so has been assessed against the old version of NPPF. I point that out just to make sure there's no misunderstanding there, Chairman.
Thank you, Speaker. Councillor Chapman.
And as a result of the examiner's report, the examiner has said that if you adopt the modifications I suggest, then you should hold a referendum, and we have to decide. The examiner says where that referendum area should be. He suggested it should be the neighbourhood development area, which is the parish of Staverton. So the recommendations before you tonight, Chairman, are that we note and welcome the significant progress in the making of a development plan for Staverton. The examiner's recommended modifications be made, that the as modified neighbourhood development plan go to referendum for the voters within the Staverton neighbourhood area, and that subject to those previous items, the proposed decision statement, which is set out in the documentation as Appendix 1, be approved subject to any necessary factual alterations, which may include the changing of dates, and that the cost of the referendum be met from earmarked reserves.
That's it, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Chapman. We've got one local member wants to speak. Councillor Gilpin.
Yes, I'm pleased to see that this has finally come before DDC. You may all think Brexit is bad. If you are ever involved in producing a neighbourhood plan, I can assure you it's along the same lines. You're split within a village, those that want development, those that don't want development. But I'm confident that after the thorough consultation, and this was started back in 2015, and we're now in 2019.
Longer than Brexit then.
Well, we can't say that yet, can we?
No, we can't say that. True, yes. We can't say that. So, 10 years to go.
You know, I'm sure it's a plan that not everyone is totally happy with, but I hope it's a plan that people can approve.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Gilpin.
Just to point out that the proposed referendum would be on the 27th of June.
Thank you, Steve. 27th of June. Thank you. Right, we've got 5 recommendations. Are you happy to agree to the recommendations?
Agreed. Thank you.
We move on to corporate issues now. This is Community Governance Review 2018-19. Jill, am I going to hand to you to introduce it, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chairman. The report before you represents the final stages of our Community Governance Review, which commenced in May 2018 with a 2-month consultation period for parish councils or district councillors to raise issues to be included in the review. The deadline for submissions was July 2018, and the final terms of reference for the Community Governance Review were then published. The first public consultation period ran for 9 weeks from September through to November, and the Community Governance Review Working Group then formulated draft recommendations which were agreed by Strategy Group on the 7th of February. The draft recommendations were then subject to a second 4-week consultation period, and the results are tabled in the report from page 105. The only draft recommendation which is now proposed to change is for the Cottersbrook Parish meeting. And if I can draw your attention to page 108 to 110 of the report, where the recommendation had been to merge Cottersbrook with Creighton Parish Council. However, during the course of the second stage consultation, a different solution presented itself, with a member of the village hall committee agreeing to come forward and to chair a parish meeting. This resolves the issue of representation for that community, and it's therefore recommended that the proposal to merge the parishes does not go ahead for that community. We're also aware of issues around the Harleston parish proposal. The proposal there being to split the parish, and that is within pages 116 to 118 in the papers. The second consultation has resulted in a closer outcome, with 53% in favour, which has reduced from the previous 68%. However, we are aware that around 35% of the additional comments to the second consultation appear to be encouraged by probably a social media campaign, with wording along the lines of I support the Althorpe Estate alternative boundary being submitted. Now, although an alternative boundary was proposed by Althorpe and was considered by the working group, this wasn't published and wasn't the subject of the consultation. It's therefore recommended that the proposal to split the parish, in accordance with the consultation that was undertaken with the Harleston community, should proceed. We're also aware of issues arising from the Overston consultation, and that's highlighted for you at pages 121 to 123 of the papers. And there the proposal was to split the parish. There was a separate proposal that came forward from Moulton Parish Council during the course of that consultation to merge with Overston Parish. However, that was not the subject of the consultation with the Overston community. The first stage consultation was quite close, with 52% not in favour of splitting the parish. The second stage consultation showed a stronger outcome, with 87% in favour of the parish remaining unchanged. So again, we recommend that the proposal not to split the parish, in accordance with the consultation that was undertaken with that community, should proceed.
Thank you, Steve. That's very kind, Jill. Thank you, Steve. Very thorough. Just want to say I've been approached on the Moulton-Overston one, but I think it's very, very important we listen to what local people say and reflect our decisions based upon their responses, rather than trying to come up with any of our own outside. Yeah, that's what it's about, local democracy in action. I'll come back to the Council Chapter here. Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to point out to members that if they read through the paperwork carefully and look at the not only the balance of the responses but the size of the responses, you get a clear message that in some cases there were 0 responses, but in one case in particular there were 542, which I think underlines the point we're often hearing in this chamber, that we should find a more effective way of carrying out consultations because nobody ever responds. I think people will respond if it really matters to them.
Absolutely right, Councillor. I've said that many times actually over the years. Councillor Ritchie.
I totally agree with that comment from Councillor Chandler. I think the last time that this came up, I suggested that this was something, these figures provided scope for a little bit of study. That, there must be a master's student in politics somewhere.
Well, you have a minority report for it, Councillor Ritchie.
Maybe a bit. But I think it is important. When we had a much bigger referendum about a couple of years ago. The votes weren't sort of categorised by whether or not they had been influenced by particular social media posts. And that perhaps gave one particular outcome that we are now trying to live with. Social media is there, and I think it is dangerous for us to ever suggest that some people who respond in a way that might have been suggested to them and in words that were suggested by social media are any more or any less sincere about their responses or have stronger or weaker views than the others, because we simply don't know. Unfortunately, social media has made a certain type of political engagement very easy. You just click your mouse. But it has been very dangerous for getting true deliberation around issues. But if we are going to run a survey, we simply don't know the motivations, the thoughts behind the person that sent it in. And therefore I believe that it's dangerous for us to suggest that even if it looks as if a lot of responses are similar, that they should be regarded as being of lesser importance.
Such as planning applications, you see that all the time, don't you? Okay, thank you for that. Councillor James?
Thank you. It's about the Overston one. And I know that 87% voted against effectively merging with Malton. I just wondered if there was a particular reason for that, and if so, what the reason was. Because I would have thought Overston would have benefited greatly by it.
Well, I know some insight on that. Sorry, Jane.
That wasn't the consult, they were consulting on not splitting the parish, which didn't involve Malton at all. The actual consultation was on just splitting the parish of Overston. The Overston issue came, the Malton issue came in later on, which we can't include in this review.
I see. So it wasn't 87% voting against. Fine.
There's two views on this, David. One is that Malton they think it's because of their experience of doing major growth, they think it would be helpful to actually include Overston and Malton under one roof.
Yes.
And Overston have taken a different view. They believe they want to do it under their own speed, and that's where the two different views are. And I think we have to respect that two parties can't agree. We have to stay where we are, status quo. Unless there's a very good reason not to. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Charter?
Yes, I just wanted to add, Chairman, that a similar comment could be applied to the comments about Harleston, in that regardless of whether it was a social media campaign or not, those people were asking for something which wasn't actually on the menu.
As you often do, Councillor Charter. Okay. Councillor Lomas?
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chairman. It's a matter of clarification. Page 111, quick. Are the figures the right way round? 5.26 in favour of not proceeding with the proposal, keeping a quick boundary of change, and 94% not in favour. Are those the right way around?
That was the second consultation where the proposal was worded differently.
Yes.
It was worded the other way around.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yes, sorry, John.
The proposal is to not proceed. To not proceed. So
not in favour of proceeding.
Not in favour
of proceeding.
Yes, that's what it says.
Not proceed.
It read, to me, it just read oddly, that's all.
I can see your point, Councillor. Not clear.
Yeah.
But it's now clear we are.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more comments? If not, can we agree the recommendations?
Agree.
Or the recommendations?